In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome back after lunch. I hope wasn't a heavy lunch in order for us not to feel sleepy, and I hope that it will, this lecture, actually, this panel will trigger a lot of interest. It is a great pleasure for me to be the chair without being elected. So it was imposed upon us, just like it was imposed upon the people who chaired before me. So this is the third session, and during this session we have two panelists. The two panelists have important academic expertise, and also in the scientific circles. Dr. Mahjoob Zweiri is going to start first. Of course, Dr. Mahjoob is well known, and he is very briefly a leading professor and an intellectual person, and he masters several languages: Arabic, Persian, English, of course, excellent command, and he heads the Gulf Studies Center. It is a research and studies center offering higher studies. We're talking about master's and PhD degrees, and several Qatari and non-Qatari students were actually drawn to this center, and I think they have become the messengers of Qatar University throughout the world, from Japan in the east until the Netherlands in the north. This is the center led by Dr. Zweiri, Qatar University. I'm not going to talk in details about his researches, his studies. The Gulf Library and the Qatar University Library actually knows him very well, and his endeavors are well known. I would like to congratulate him and welcome him in order to talk about the Russian war on Ukraine and the future of the nuclear agreement with Iran. So, we are going to be discussed these things. We have several topics, and we hope that the future is going to be better. Thank you. The microphone is not working. The microphone is not working. Unfortunately, we cannot hear the gentleman. Once again, good evening to you all. I would like to thank my dear colleague, Dr. Mohammed Al-Mesfer, for this introduction. He is someone we learn from all the time. I would like to thank the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies for this invitation. And it is a great pleasure to be here with you and share some ideas regarding the Russian war on Ukraine and its impact on the nuclear agreement with Iran, or the JCPOA. I will be focusing on three main points. The first theme, in which I'm going to try to answer how big was the impact of this war on the nuclear dossier with Iran. I would like to remind everyone about three things. The first one: the key players when it comes to the nuclear deal are the same players in the Russian-Ukrainian war. This war put Russia in confrontation with the West and the United States. They are member of the 5+1. So we're talking about the same actors and the same two, or in the two different important developments. The second point is that the nuclear deal opened up a new discussion regarding energy. European countries have energy concerns. Iran has energy concerns because Iran wants to export energy, and the main point is the nuclear deal. So it is a key factor when it comes to the development of the nuclear agreement or deal. And the third aspect is relating to the development of the positions. At the beginning, the position of Iran was between the two. So Iran criticized the West and considered that the West was responsible for this war. And in reality, as someone who follows the foreign policy of Iran, this is in line with the Iranian position. I would like to remind the participants in the 90s when Kuwait was invaded, Iran adopted the same position. And in 2017, in June, when there was a blockade imposed on Qatar, Iran adopted the same position. However, this time, after around 3 to 4 months, Iran took steps back when it comes to this position to say that this confrontation is between the West and Russia. So this is why Iran sided with Russia and did away with some sort of neutrality when it comes to these issues, and not allowing use of force to change political geography. That was the terminology in Iran, not using power in order to change political geography. But in this Russia-Ukraine war, Iran gave up this principle, and this is the main development when it comes to the foreign policy of Iran, and this is why several people are questioning the credibility of this policy. Of course, Iran wants Russia, but at the same time, Iran knows that Russia did not serve Iran. Russia, since 2002, when the negotiations started regarding the nuclear program of Iran and sanctions were imposed starting 2005, Russia did not use the veto, not even once, to save Iran from sanctions. And Iran was subject to the biggest 4 or 5 sanction packages that largely impacted the economy of the country without seeing Russia using the veto. This is why everybody is asking, actually, why is Iran supporting Russia the way we're seeing? Of course, I would like to remind everyone, just like the position vis-a-vis the Syrian position, we are not standing with the Syrian regime, we are talking about the axis of resistance. So some people justify this. They talk about the similarities in politics. So they start saying, for instance, I stand with the Syrian regime because I was invited, and we're talking about resistance. But they do not see that millions of people were displaced, and Syria is back 100 years back. So there's a moral issue here, ethical issue here when it comes to the position. So why this support to Russia, although Iran did not benefit at all from the Russian position? Maybe this would subject Iran to another round of sanctions because of the military assistance that I will be talking about soon. So the nuclear deal was largely affected by this. The most important thing is the delay we're seeing. Despite all the negotiations, the optimism in Europe, the pressure by Europe to reach a deal, everybody was optimistic. In reality, it did not happen. Why? Because there is a problem with Russia. Russia does not want a deal because this impacts Russia at the economic level. There's also a disagreement as to how much it would contribute to finding a solution to the problem of energy. And I will be talking about the figures. Iran's return is not going to have a large impact like Iran is saying and the West is preaching. And also there is an Iranian-American disagreement regarding key issues with domestic reverberations. Iran domestically has divisions, and the Democrats in the United States have a problem before the midterms. So we are seeing repercussions inside Iran, inside the United States. They are echoed in the nuclear deal negotiations. So this is why we did not see a deal, and we are not going to see a deal until 2023 at least. This had big economic repercussions on Iran because the size of sanctions imposed on Iran in May 2018 led to a large negative impact on the Iranian economy. And in the second theme, I'm going to be talking about the impact on the relation between Iran and Gulf countries. Iran and the Gulf countries were in the gray zone when it comes to the position initially, but Iran gradually became in the clear, like had a clear position. Saudi Arabia tried to politically and through the media assist and the positions at the level of OPEC plus. The Emirates, Qatar was clear. They do not want conflict. They want peace and stability to be guaranteed in the world. But of course, there's a clear position that they are close to the Western position. This is harming democracy, and Russia is going against international law one way or another, and this is in line with the foreign policy of Qatar. So force cannot be the decisive factor when it comes to political crises. The remaining countries, when it comes to their positions, the prospect of this conflict is not good. On the contrary, Iran practically sees itself with with the UAE and with Saudi Arabia in relative support of Russia. The Saudi and Emirati positions started developing towards trying to be open towards the two parties, the Ukrainians and the Russians. The Iranians, on the other hand, are sticking to their relations with Russia only. And this leads us to the military support, the Iranian military support that is being talked about to Russia. The first reports, the first intelligence reports regarding this support were published in April. And in reality, we had very few information, mainly security intelligence. Everybody was skeptical about them. In order to understand this and its impact on the relations between Iran and the Gulf, Iran, when it comes to managing these issues, so it doesn't need to be with the knowledge of the president and the speaker, etc. We have specific agencies. It is the security and military agency when it comes to the weapons deals. So it is possible that this deal happened with Russia. It is possible to see Shahid drones, also other advanced drones to Mahjoob 6 to Russia, exported to Russia, and it is very clear that this happened after the strong strikes by the Ukrainian government that targeted the Russian government. And because the Russians were not ready at the beginning, and they were not ready, they were not prepared, they did not target achieve their objectives, and this tarnished the reputation of Iran. This is why the Iranians sent trainers in order to train Russians in Crimea to use them. Why this sensitivity? It is because Iran cannot export weapons. It was lifted in 2020, October 2020, 5 years after signing the nuclear deal. The lifting of the embargo, unfortunately, this shows how much divided they are. The United States tried to convince the Europeans to reimpose sanctions on Iran and prevent Iran from exporting weapons. The West refused that. The Western countries rejected the US as suggestion, and Trump back then did not convince the Europeans to reimpose these sanctions. Now Iran is benefiting from this European strategic error by selling weapons or offering weapons to Russia. Of course, the decision upon which the resolution actually was at the level of the Security Council regarding the lifting of the embargo. So Iran moved forward in this direction. The Gulf countries could be in some sort of observing zone, maybe supporting, or there's like diplomacy behind closed doors, maybe some openness here and there, some unannounced dialogue. But it is very clear that the Gulf is damaged because of the energy situation. Gulf countries are not capable of finding a solution alone. They will not be capable of continuing in the coming years with this situation of uncertainty, because it will have impact on the prices and the strategic plans of Gulf countries and the economic performance. It is in the Gulf countries' interests for this uncertainty to come to an end. The third and last theme is, to what extent will Iran's return to the energy market is going to be important. What do the figures tell us? We are always blamed of not relying on figures. Let us talk figures. Russia, before the war, used to produce 5 million barrels of oil a day, 3 million barrels of light oil a day. So Russia now, when it comes to its production, it will decrease to 2.4 million barrels a day. Iran, regardless or irrespective of its production, cannot reach more than 3.4 million barrels a day. And domestically, they need 1.7 million approximately, and they sell the rest if they could, and if the sanctions are lifted. So imagine with me, even if Iran tries to increase its productivity, Iran will not be capable of contributing more than that in the energy market, or oil market in particular. Today, 400,000 to 600,000 barrels a day are produced in Iran to the market, and they have 150 million barrels in the sea and in China. If today Iran wants to supply, they can offer 100 million barrel a day to support the oil market. The question is, what is the impact of 100 million barrel a day when it comes to this political uncertainty? Let us remember that the problem is not relating to energy. There is a level of political uncertainty and weakness of government performance. The most important issue is that these Western countries, to include the United States, used to blame us and saying, you do not have a plan B. Learn how to have contingency, plan B. But on the second day of the crisis, they did not have a plan B. Governments in the West actually were hit the wall very hard. So I was telling the officials in Germany, when are you going to stop lecturing us about Plan B? You had panicking since the first 24 hours, the rallies, the protests, and now they are afraid of the populist extreme right because of the poor performance of the government. What's even worse is that they used to give us lectures about clean and green energy, clean energy, 24 hours a day. But they went back to coal and to nuclear, rusty, actually, plants. So the moral issues actually cannot be overstated when it comes to this issue. From gas, Russia produces annually 640 billion square or cubic meters, exporting 240 billion, and out of the 240 billion, 180 billion go to Turkey and Europe mainly. Russia produces 17% of the natural gas out of 4,037 billion cubic meters. Iran is not even close to reaching these numbers. Iran, now, we said that they have 100 million crude outside, and if they can add some sort of production, Iran can contribute in giving some assurance to the market, so psychological situation without supporting the economies of the state. Iran cannot return to the previous levels, so 380 million barrels before the embargo. They need at least 6 to 12 months. 6 to 12 months to do that. If all of this happens, in reality, Iran's production will be around 3.6 or 3.8 million barrels. So we should not exaggerate and say that Iran's return is going to be a solution to the many problems that the energy market is suffering from. And let me remind everyone, the Iranian oil and gas is not exported through pipelines. For the first time, Iran since 1953, of course, the first well started in 1908, but when it became nationwide, the first agreement with Gazprom, $40 billion 2 months ago. That is the first agreement between Iran and another country in order to give this asset to one company in the world. The question, will Russia be keen to get the Iranian oil into the market, although Russia is the main producer of gas? You have the answer. Finally, if the pressure is alleviated and if Iran returns to the energy market, this could help Iran in buying some important technology for gas fields, because gas fields need a number of level of pressure, and Iran cannot access the equipment. Iran would be capable of doing so. The most important thing is, at this point, is the field with the Qatar. So Iran would be capable of exporting gas, because Iran cannot do so now unless it is very secret deals. And finally, I would like to mention 2 points. I'm sorry, Dr. Mohammed, for being lengthy. Iran needs, from between 2023 to 2030, 7 billion cubic meters of gas for domestic consumption. They do not have it. They have 2.4, which is the most optimistic projection. So even with all the investments, they cannot export gas. They need it domestically. And they need to increase it from 7 billion cubic meters a day to 12 billion cubic meters. So this is the indicator. If people say Iran's return is going to be a solution, no. The energy crisis is bigger than just Iran returning to find a solution. And the last remark, the oil infrastructure of Iran is not capable and will not be capable of pushing Iran towards finding solutions in the energy field. And this puts more pressure on the Gulf to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahjoob. Now I'll give the floor to Mr. Şaban Karadaş. He will be lecturing on the implications of the Ukraine crisis on relationships between GCC countries and Turkey. Mr. Şaban is a researcher at the Gulf unit at Qatar University. He taught at the Diplomatic Institute at Saqqar University and the Police Academy and the Military Academy and the University of Economics and Technology. He got his PhD from Utah University and MA from Middle East Technical University in Ankara and another MA from Bonn in Germany. He has a number of papers published in Janus. Now I give him the floor.
Shukran, Dr. Mohammed. Let me take this off. Thank you, organizers, for giving me this opportunity. Actually, Professor Bulent Aras was scheduled to speak on this panel, but since he had to travel, I joined him. So this is going to be sort of our joint paper. The topic is still the same, the implications of the Russia-Ukraine conflict for Turkey's foreign policy in general, but Turkey-Gulf GCC countries' relations in particular, in order to contextualize Turkey's reaction to the conflict and also understand the implications of that conflict for Turkish foreign policy. Let me briefly talk about Turkish foreign policy first. Just a couple of observations, which also overlaps with some of the conceptual discussions we had earlier in the morning regarding how to define the crisis and how to categorize, how to label the strategies pursued by different international actors, Gulf actors. So the way to describe Turkey's international role has been a matter of scholarly discussion, policy discussion. There are different definitions that are used in the literature to define Turkey's international orientation, positioning, but personally I have always put emphasis on this concept of regional power. Turkey is a regional power, but what is unique for Turkey is Turkey at the same time is a multi-regional power, meaning Turkey is not part of a single regional context, but simultaneously at the same time Turkey is part of different regional complexes, security complexes. So that makes Turkey among the regional powers a unique one, because in many ways, which also forms the basis of our discussion today about Turkey's role in this particular crisis. Turkey is sitting at the intersection of different regions. So in a sense, Turkey is connecting one regional security order to another in both positive or negative ways. Okay. So that role is important, but at the same time, Turkey has a regional power role that goes beyond some of the regional powers, in the sense that in recent years, Turkey expressed a certain ambition of regional leadership, in the sense of leading regional affairs, but not only at the regional level, but also at the international level, trying to, in some cases, represent the region at the international fora, trying to be an internationally influential actor, drawing it on its regional depth. But what is also unique here, what shapes Turkey's policy on different crises, which is very relevant here, is Turkey's reaction to the penetration of the global powers into its own regional contexts. Sometimes certain regional powers are willing to work with the global powers. Sometimes they are resistant to working with the regional powers. Traditionally, Turkey has been pursuing this pro-Western orientation, through which Turkey has been rather sympathetic, rather lenient to accept the penetration of Western powers into its own regional contexts. But what we see in recent decades, increasingly there has been cases of divergence between Turkey and its global powers. So the penetration of the United States into its own neighborhood, be it in the Middle East, be it in the Black Sea context, has been increasingly seen as a source of trouble, as was mentioned in the morning by Georgia and others. The devastating implications of American policies, misguided policies, miscalculated policies for Turkey's own security interests. Of course, the obvious case of Iraq has been mentioned in the morning, but also from the Turkish point of view, the aftermath of American penetration intervention into the region usually leaves with a certain negative legacy, and this shapes to a large extent Turkey's reaction to the extra-regional penetration. When we look at past crises of similar magnitude, here I would love to diverge from Georgia. He's described this war as a tsunami. Yes, but it wasn't a one-shot tsunami. There were previous waves where the signs were there, but as Dr. Mahjoob also underlined, many Western European countries didn't want to wake up for the new upcoming geopolitical reality. They were looking other way around. They were looking into greening of energy issues, refusing to talk it in geopolitical terms, so on and so forth. So the crisis perhaps might be a tsunami, but not only aftershocks. Earlier shocks were already there. 2008 Russia-Georgia crisis was the most important turning point in that respect. 2014 Crimea. So when we look at Turkey's reaction in such cases, we see that Turkey does filter its own priorities, its own policies through its own optics. So this is also what was discussed earlier in the morning regarding the Gulf reactions. Just because now it is so urgent to contain Russia for the Western or American interest, it doesn't mean that Turkey will just do what is the best strategy for the West. So Turkey has been always filtering it through its own strategic optics, and especially here the so-called concept of strategic autonomy is very relevant, and this is one of the key drivers of Turkey's international conduct. And in many of similar crises, be it 2003 Iraq war, 2008 Russia-Georgia war, 2014 and other cases, Turkey, even though it is part of the Western alliance, still puts its own strategic optics at the very center of analysis. So for Turkey, as I mentioned, in order to understand the current reaction, we have to go back to 2014, 2018. So we have to ask the question, what is the challenge here? What is the strategic challenge that needs a response? It was, of course, Russian revisionism. This was, as I hinted earlier, neglected or ignored. Many of the Western European countries didn't want to read it that way. When 2008 Georgia conflict happened, during the height of the conflict, there was a discussion about responding to Russia, but afterwards, again, relations with Russia were normalized. And then 2014 came. Increasingly, there was an effort to isolate Russia, but despite that, many Western actors, so in that respect, including Turkey, preferred not to develop clear strategic responses to this new reality of Russian revisionism. In the literature, academic literature, there is a discussion about whether it is revisionism, it is neo-revisionism. But for some scholars, it was obviously revisionism. It had to be responded much earlier. But many countries, including Turkey, preferred not to. They sometimes looked the other way around. They wanted to maintain relations with Russia as business as usual way. And then in that respect, different countries, of course here the biggest focus these days is on Germany. How, despite all these warning signs, the Germans preferred not to respond to the Russian revisionism, which led to the current situation. So Turkey also developed its own ways of dealing with the Russian revisionism, not a clear response. From the perspective of Turkish foreign policy, we use this concept of compartmentalization, compartmentalizing different spheres of relationship with certain countries. For instance, Turkey-Iran relations is a good example. So in the case of Turkey-Russia relations, we have seen that Turkey developed this compartmentalized relationship with Russia, areas of conflict, areas of cooperation, areas of tension, rivalry, were put into different compartments. As a result, the Turkish-Russian relationship, despite the historical negative legacies, despite the Cold War legacies, in the last 20 years or so, has gone through a rapid process of deepening, in which certain strategic flavor dimension has been also headed. And then this relationship increasingly emerged as such. But the question is why? Why Turkey did not react to the Russian revisionism as it should have from a realist point of view, perhaps? There are different reasons, of course, but according to my understanding, it was mainly because of Turkey's perceptions of overlapping strategic neighborhoods with Russia. Okay, Russia might present a challenge in one situation. For instance, 2014 Russian annexation of Crimea was a clear strategic challenge to Turkey, but despite that, Turkey and Russia had other files to work with, and Turkey had some other concerns. So here, the bigger concern for Turkey was maintaining the broader regional order and stability. Especially the Black Sea context for Turkey has been really important. I don't know, I don't want to go too much into detail about the Montreux Convention, the maritime order in the Black Sea, so on and so forth. So for Turkey, despite certain acts of revisionism on the part of Russia, maintaining the bigger, broader stability and peace was much more valuable, but at the same time, the overlapping interests in economy, Turkish investments in Russia, Russian investments in Turkey, trade opportunities, and energy deals, including the nuclear power plant, ongoing projects, so on and so forth, was an important factor that led Turkey to develop a policy of compartmentalized accommodation relationship. The other part of the explanation is about the US role here, as I hinted at earlier, especially the damaging implications of American involvement in Turkey's neighborhoods, the negative legacies of Iraq War, other instances, in a sense led Turkey to resist to the Western American calls to take a bolder stance against Russia. This is something that we need to keep in mind. And also at the same time, as we have observed, Turkish-Western relationship, Turkish-US relationship has gone through different crises of their own because of other files, of course, including the developments in the Middle East, Syria, so on and so forth. So against this background, when the current crisis happened, when Russia invaded certain parts of Ukraine and moved further, Turkey reacted in its own ways, and still there is a discussion about how best to define Turkey's reaction. In the morning, some concepts were used: neutrality, hedging, and then I remember from the Arab Center, there is a new paper published this week by Dr. Emad. He calls it a neutral policy. There is a debate. What is Turkey's policy? What best describes it? Personally, I recently wrote a paper. I was not sure whether to call it active neutrality or not, but it is definitely not a neutral policy. If it is neutral policy, it is what we used to call in the Turkish foreign policy literature, it is active neutrality, but it is beyond that. I mean, when we look at Turkey's reactions, Turkey has taken clear positions when it comes to military assistance to Ukraine, which was also a matter of discussion earlier in the morning. Approaching conflict, delivering weapons, offensive weapons to Ukraine is a good sign that Turkey is not just sitting on the fence as a normal neutral policy would require. And then also in the middle of the conflict, Turkey kept supplying the military assistance to Ukraine. That's an important indication. Also on international fora, Turkey took positions clearly. So in the sense, that policy, in my understanding, is not a neutral one. But despite that, there are other examples, other Turkish behaviors. Maintaining the communication with Russia, similar to the Gulf leaders, personal leadership level diplomacy has continued. But more important than that, Turkey did not join with the Western sanctions, energy sanctions. Turkey For instance, Turkish Airlines continues to fly to Russian destinations, so on and so forth. And also, there are issues about the Russian business people relocating into Turkey, so on and so forth. So on those issues, in terms of not cutting the ties, not severing the ties with Russia, Turkey maintained a different policy. Some people, when look at these two sets of reactions, they tend to call Turkey as hedging or neutral, but I think it is more than that. Turkey is seeking to cautiously counter Russia in a way, Russian aggression, but doing it in a way not to harm its broader strategic interests, which is to maintain stability. So here, I think one factor that drives really Turkish strategic thinking is this historical fear, historical legacy of not getting stuck in the middle. I mean, personally, I wrote my dissertation. One of the cases in my dissertation was the 2008 conflict. And then historically, this is what we were always taught in schools and so on and so forth. This is, I see, in the middle of the conflict between the lines of the decision makers, historical legacy of what we may call not to be stuck in the middle when the great powers conflict. So in the Turkish reading, strategic reading, so beyond the issue of Ukraine, as was mentioned in the morning, this return of great power geopolitics, return of great power competition, Turkey is overcautious not to act in a way that it will be stuck in the middle, and that's why I think it is very careful. But this crisis also brought quite many opportunities to Turkey. This is where briefly I will go into Gulf dimension and then conclude. So this was a good opportunity to bring to the table some of the assets of Turkish foreign policy, Turkish diplomacy, especially middle-range diplomatic initiatives. This was, in a sense, a strength of Turkey, which it had built over the recent years. In a sense, the government was also quite eager to utilize it, especially offering certain mediation services in terms of the grain deal or prisoner exchange or humanitarian corridors, so on and so forth. This enabled Turkey to be back on the world stage at a time that its relationship with the West was also questioned. And also the geopolitical position of Turkey was reiterated. But of course, there are negative implications in terms of the rising energy prices, global commodity prices, the inflationary pressures, especially considering the domestic economic situation for the government and the upcoming elections next year. So it was a challenge, but there were diplomatic opportunities. I think they are doing their best to capitalize on that. This is where I will briefly go to the Gulf dimension, if you could give me 2 minutes or so, Doctor. The crisis, the Ukraine crisis came at a time in the Turkish Gulf dimension. The biggest issue was the normalization. So achieving that normalization, which has been a project building up for several years, if not earlier, since 2017 Qatar blockade crisis. And Turkey also took certain decisions regarding severing its ties with UAE, Saudi Arabia, so on and so forth. And then not only that, but also certain issues with Israel, Egypt. The normalization was the big agenda, and absorbing it, managing it, selling it was not an easy task. I would say the Ukraine-Russia crisis, in a sense, helped Turkey to manage the normalization agenda quietly, because as the international agenda shifted toward this conflict, Turkey found some space to work on this file behind the scenes, not at the center of the spotlights. That was a good one. But also it created new avenues of coordination, cooperation between Turkey and Gulf actors. So Qatar-Turkey joint efforts in mediation in the past, we are aware of them. They have quite a good working relationship in that respect. But even in this current crisis, I guess in the morning there was a reference to this prisoner swap deal jointly worked out by Turkey and Saudi Arabia. So this created another opportunity to develop joint projects. And then the policies of Turkish leader and the regional leaders in terms of not burning the bridges with Putin and Moscow and playing a mediation role, I guess it also overlaps to some extent. But also this recent attitude of the Gulf countries not going fully in line with the Western policies, as we have seen with the OPEC Plus decision, so on and so forth, maintaining this kind of autonomous, independent course also helps Turkey a lot. It also helps Turkey build a stronger case because Turkey pursues a similar policy. I see Dr. Mohammed is getting anxious time-wise, and one more sentence I will finish. Another dimension is, of course, as I said, the crisis gave Turkey the opportunity to capitalize on some of its strengths. This has been also the case for the arms industry, especially the proven, battle-proven effectiveness of the Turkish drones and other weapon systems. As we have seen, as part of the normalization, there is a big movement toward signing additional defense deals between Turkey and GCC countries. This has been also one of the positive repercussions of the conflict for Turkey and Gulf relations.
Thank you, Dr. Mahjoob and Dr. Şaban, for these lectures. Now we open the floor, but please, I would ask your permission to pose a question to Dr. Mahjoob. Dr. Mahjoob, my question to you is, we see before us Turkey producing drones, Iran producing drones, Yemen, the Houthis producing drones, and they are in a deep financial crisis. All these areas go through financial crises. We in the Gulf are very rich. We have an enormous wealth in oil and gas. We have sovereign funds everywhere in the world and investments in hundreds of billions. Why don't we possess such a weapon, like i.e. drones? Is there an international will which is depriving us, or does the fault lie in us, ourselves? This is the kind of question which is likely to implicate me and get me in trouble. When it comes to weapons and nuclear weapons, they talk about three requirements. They talk about capabilities, the financial capabilities, technical capabilities, and then the political decision or will. I think the answer is clear. There is no political will. These countries see their priorities differently, and you know, Dr. Mohammed and the ladies and gentlemen, the audience, they think they have enough protection provided, so therefore they don't need even to keep a knife in their kitchen in case. I think the priority is to change for you to feel that you need to keep a knife in your kitchen, then develop that into bioweapons. Simply, my answer is there is no political decision, no political will. I'll start from the left. I'm in the middle. Please state your name and affiliation. Abdulrahman Asiri from Kuwait. Thank you. It's a good job we find a leftist we thought the left is gone and everyone is a rightist now. My dear sir, thank you very much, both of you, Dr. Mahjoob and Dr. Şaban. I teach sociopolitics. I'm happy that you blew the myth that our discipline is all about just talking. Now you use the facts and figures to respond to that. I too have a question. You spoke about the repercussions and the implications of the Ukraine crisis on the United States and others, but you have not spoken about the internal situation in Iran. The question is about Iran. You have not spoken about the internal situation, especially that we are faced with an uprising in Iran which has been going on for weeks. I made some studies too on the military capabilities of the GCC countries and the crises between the GCC countries. This is a very large number. People cannot imagine. I think one of the reasons is because historically the military philosophy or military doctrine in the GCC countries is different than Iran, Turkey, Israel, India. The military philosophy is peaceful, based on security, protection, non-aggression, and etc. This has been there before independence and after independence, post-independence. I think part of this is the military philosophy in our countries is not to have a big military setup. We're people who want to live. Whether we live in a tent or in a villa, we don't want problems. If we enter into this sphere, we create more problems for ourselves. Thank you. Mahmoud al-Novli from the Sultanate of Oman. My question is to Dr. Mahjoob. I liked your wonderful observations on the Iranian situation, and it sounds to me as if you're sort of blaming Iran for some of their decisions. In my opinion, there is a fact that we must understand. There is a policeman of this world, and that is America, who do not recognize anybody as an ally. When Russia did not side with Iran just to be nice to America until they discovered there was a trap being laid for them in the Ukraine, and Iran also discovered that all what they want from it is to buy their gas, and some countries like Russia now regret that they did not do anything when America invaded Iraq, although they realized that mistake and interfered in Syria. And Iran realizes that if they destroy Russia, then they will be destroyed, so maybe they can preserve their own existence by getting into some sort of a deal with Russia, because Iran signed an agreement with America, but America negated that, and so America cannot leave anybody else the opportunity to gain the control from its own hands, And of course, the United States does not look at the Gulf countries as partners. They only view the Gulf countries as a source of benefits or something. Whenever they think they can utilize this and get something out of it, then we are, in their eyes, our partners. If not, then they can ignore us. Maybe we can get together and cooperate at the economic level, and more importantly, if we make peace with our own selves and put our own house in order, because then we can utilize all our resources. Unfortunately, our problem lies in ourselves, and we must give up this term protection, because many countries can live without this protection. Dr. Zaid? Thank you, Chair. My question is to both speakers. In view of the revelation of the reality in the West, the double standards, their inability to have a plan B, as you said, and in view of what when the American will and diktats in the Gulf did not go America's way, and this has made applied pressure on the European Union. Shouldn't we really, according to the vision by Prince Mohammed bin Salman, that the Middle East should be this big force? But if we want to raise ourselves to that level, shouldn't we have a plan A? And plan A shouldn't be for GCC as one unit, Saudi Arabian GCC, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey. Shouldn't this regime be re-established? The question is, what are the obstacles, whether in the GCC context, Iran context, or Turkey context?
Tanaka from Japan. I really enjoyed the discussion so far. My question is to Dr. Mahjoob. You've talked about the, say, amount of Russian oil and oil products in the market. And if we see that it is incompatible with other resources. Now, the question for myself, the question I hold myself, and also I would like to ask your opinion about it, is that if the Iranian nuclear deal is to be revived, it still won't be sufficient for the world to compensate for the lost Russian oil. Yes. So in the end, would it be prudent to consider that the United States would not lift Iranian oil sanctions, meaning that they would not revive JCPOA until they get a full-fledged support from OPEC main producers like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and even Venezuela lifting its sanctions first, to have enough capacity altogether to compensate for the possible loss of Russian oil from the market?
شكرا سيد الرئيس. فهد الفضالة من المعهد العربي للتخطيط الكويت. سؤالي للدكتور
From
محجوب.
the Arab Institute in Kuwait, my question to Dr. Mahjoob: are the threats by Iran against Kuwait regarding the Al-Durra gas field, are they just for media consumption, or are they real? When you say Iran does not have the capabilities to extract gas. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you, Dr. Mahjoob. Thank you, Dr. Şaban. My question:
عن إن إيران تخلت عن
you
الحياد
say that Iran has given up its neutrality in the war in the Ukraine. Then you say the secret in Iran's foreign policy and the question of drones, Shaheen drones, which are exported to the Ukraine. Has Iran declared officially that, publicly, that they're taking part in this war or not? My question to the gentleman from Turkey, Turkey recently tries to mediate between Russia, Ukraine, and in exporting wheat. What is the impact of Russia's position in the Ukraine on these dossiers?
Hello, thank you. This is my name is Thomas O'Donnell. I work on energy and geopolitics. I'm based in Berlin, but I'm American. So for Professor Zweiri, I have a question. I've worked on this, not so much lately, but this Iran question since, I think, Bill Clinton. Because I'm a nuclear physicist. So everyone invited me to speak, and I'd always say, thank you, but it's not about nuclear. That's not what it's about. And so I'm going to ask you something about what it's about, but by giving you a little bit of a theory. I remember after the Iraq War, there was some offer from the Iranian side that, hey, they were pretty happy that their existential enemy, the Iraqis, had been pushed down by the Americans, and they offered to make all these deals. Many things in the Middle East, I won't go through it, that the Americans wanted, that they understood, and they said, and we'll make the nuclear program, which was not the present nuclear program, this is the one left over from like the Shah's time, we'll make it tabletop, okay? And at first in the White House, they said, okay. I mean, Bush said, why not? They're even going to give us Al-Qaeda prisoners. What's the problem? But later, my understanding is people, others in the White House, said, okay, we make a deal with them, and they start making a lot of money on oil again. And what happens, they're going to arm themselves, and they'll do something like Saddam did. And then what do? We have to send 100,000, this time 200,000 troops. We don't trust them. And so when they said no, my understanding from the Iranian side was they all sat there in Tehran and said, why not? We offered them everything, and they looked at each other and said, oh, it's us. They don't want us. And so they needed some guarantee, and they had no leverage, and they wanted, and so they launched this new nuclear program as a leverage. They couldn't go too far, or the U.S. would attack them, but on the other hand, to make trouble. I think by dysfunction on the U.S. side, maximalism, they actually gave them time to develop it, and Obama came along and said, we just have to get this off the table. But the real question is a guarantee that Iran does not project power in the Gulf, or now it's beyond the Gulf, in the region, in a way that's going to destabilize the region. Is there a way to make a deal like that, some way, beyond the nuclear issue, at the present time? What would you imagine? Yeah. I mean, otherwise it's regime change somehow, right?
ممكن ناخذ أسئلة مرة واحدة.
زي ما تحدثوا you are the boss.
شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا. It's a comment more than a question, but I add my voice to Dr. Mohammed Al-Mesfer in the big question facing us in the Gulf, especially the regimes and leadership. Since Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, now more than 32 years ago, the question is persisting. We don't want it to be persistent again for another 32 years. Either we should really confront this question, and we use all the capabilities, financial, military, to build a Gulf regional security system which can protect it. Otherwise, every time there is a threat from Iran or everybody, the Gulf countries beg protection from China or America or Russia, now from Israel too. And now, even by way of justification only, they say they're doing what they're doing because Iran said some. This question is a central question, but it is not. It is like the elephant in the room. Why can't they get together and build one Gulf security regime to protect them all? The last two questions, please. Good evening. I am from King Abdulaziz University. Thank you for the panelists and thank you, Dr. Mahjoob, for this beautiful presentation. My question to you, Doctor, is the recent Iranian siding with Russia is a tool to apply pressure on the United States to reach a satisfactory deal on the nuclear issue, or is Iran already feeling that any deal is bound to be either not happening or a failure? Dr. Dhafar Al-Azmi, I just want to correct one piece of information, and maybe it's the gentleman who said the Gulf countries beg protection. This strategic aspect is there for more than 100 years, whether with the British or the American. They are balanced agreements. The word begging is inappropriate to describe what we do in the Gulf. Now we ask the panelists to answer.
I would like to begin with the question by the doctor from Saudi Arabia. So Iran has this idea that the world is changing, and I've heard this from one of the negotiators and a conference. He said, the world is changing, the Gulf countries need to understand that. I asked, you do not want to change with the world? Why do you suppose that the others are changing, the world is changing, etc.? They think that the world is changing in their favor. So the US is collapsing, the West is collapsing, the East is on the rise. This is the idea, the 1980s, the Russian phenomenon, the Russian sample. The East is great. So Iran, we're talking about this historical experience. It does not prove that Iran was offered by the East. Iran was supported always by the West. And the biggest proof is that all of the foreign policy of Iran since the Islamic Revolution is focused on the Arabs and there's in the West. So all of these absurd ideas talking about this Orient and this idea. So had this Orient or East been capable of offering something, it would have been something that if India and China offer something, why would they need the nuclear deal? We don't need it. Let's do a deal with China. Problem solved. So I think it is important for us to avoid saying the West is not important. The West is important when it comes to the political experience of Iran, the cultural composition of Iran, even the religious figures. They say the British actually inkari inglisa. This is a proverb in Persian. So the British are behind all what's bad that happened to us. So anyway, this attempt to face the United States, say that we are capable of building alliances, play with the big powers. And everybody knows in reality, I think you all know that Russia in 2000 2010 to 2012 did a military reform and special operations were tested in Syria, and they succeeded because Syria was an empty battlefield. However, in Ukraine they lost greatly, and the Russian experience when it comes to the military is being actually laughed at by the West. So the Iranian attempt to go towards Russia is an attempt to say to the United States, we are capable of building our alliances away from you. We do not need you. We do not want to deal with you. And the more Iran is facing internal economic pressure, the more Iran goes toward China and Russia, and this has never been beneficial to Iran. When it comes to guarantees, when the deal was signed in 2015, it was not meant to succeed because 1 week after the deal, the Iranian parliament received a letter from the supreme leader saying you do not need to pass any law threatening the Iranian culture. So you have investors from international companies. They have some sort of cultural invasion. So actually it was meant to die. I actually said back then, everybody said, Doctor, you are pessimistic. No, it was clear there is an internal uncertainty, and the religious authority thinks that the other is a threat. How do you open your country's doors then? Iran is talking about guarantees. Iran wants the West to say, we will not threaten you again. We will not withdraw from the deal. There will be no regime change. In reality, the US said so. However, the problem now is that there's a shift in the visions. So President Ibrahim Raisi is taking the lead because the leader is sick. Of course, when you have big responsibilities when it comes to a big dossier like the nuclear deal, you will have some strong positions. Dear brothers and sisters, note with me, when we talk about Iran, everybody thinks about the legacy. How will I be perceived in the future? I do not want to leave a bad legacy. Everybody thinks about ideology. Everybody wants to save the rights of the Islamic Republic. So there was a change. This complicated the nuclear issue. This is why the United States cannot give guarantees because of political and constitutional obstacles, and if Iran is asked to give guarantees to the Gulf countries, for instance, Iran would not do so. So now we are talking about pressure towards the party that can score more points. I do not think that Iran can receive any sort of guarantees from the West. Any deal will happen, will be short-lived to pass time, to try to buy some time, and try to contain the crisis and overcome the crisis. There will be no deal because we're talking about 2015, so less than 8 years. So we're talking about an expired deal. The other issue that I wanted to comment on is Iran, Dr. Mohammed, is not going to recognize, and Russia is not going to recognize the presence of military cooperation. They say this is American data information. We do not do so. We do not have drones. It's all lies. So practically speaking, as analysts, we are, according to them, we are fooling ourselves. When it comes to Kuwait, Iran always highlights the rights, the islands with the Emirates. Every time they tackle this topic, they always want to say to the other party, I am aware and I did not forget about my right. Are they capable of guaranteeing this right or not? We don't know. This includes the joint field with Kuwait. So the question is, what about the technology? They do not have the technology to benefit from the oil field. And this will be part of the political rhetoric, saying we are a strong country, we are a strong state, we defend our rights, we are not going to give them away. The question regarding the repercussions on the internal or domestic affairs. Dr. Abdurrida there are troubles inside of Iran. The protests actually, when it comes to the head cover, the hijab, the protests are not relating to the issue of hijab or the head cover, but it is actually relating to the fact that the political system infringe on the values of the people. What about you? Make it less corrupt, make this regime less corrupt, prevent suspicious transactions. So you want this woman to wear hijab. What about corruption? What about corrupt people? So the protests and the latest protests reflect an anger in the society vis-a-vis the performance of the government, political hypocrisy, the failure of the governance, and the being incapable of protecting something very important. Iran was targeted 38 times, cyber attacks, 11 nuclear scientists were assassinated in Iran. We're talking about a program that was worth billions of dollars, and Iran is not capable of protecting it. So you cannot retaliate. When Iran tried to retaliate in Turkey, the Turkish authorities said, stop, it's not up to you to go and assassinate Israelis. You cannot do this. This is Turkish territories. What did Iran do? They sacked the director of military intelligence. Thank you, go home. So there is troubles inside Iran because of all of these factors. We know because of economic factors sometimes or crisis, but in reality it is a translation of the anger. I'm sorry, Dr. Mohammed, for being lengthy again. When it comes to the joint or common Arab work, dear brother, we are societies that do not know what they want, and they do not know how to work in order to achieve what they want. So we have this idea about the other. We do not think that we have the capacity. We are more young societies, more educated, we have universities. But what are our contributions? We are always supporting what's coming from outside, from the West. Green eyes are always better than dark-skinned people. The others are always better. Benchmarking is what we care about. Give me a break. Our education, Dr. Muhammad, sorry, when it comes to humanities and social sciences, here it is all based on humanities and social sciences. This field, it's like the children of the first wife. Nobody respects us. Nobody gives attention to us. You talk politics, history, Sharia, etc. So Sharia 55, medicine 90. We do not respect language. We do not respect religion. You don't want to be a religious person, don't be a religious person, but respect a religion. We need people to understand Sharia. So actually you have graduate students who do not speak Arabic properly. We have a great problem. It is deeper actually than this system. We are lost culturally, politically, socially. We do not know what our value system is. We are aliens to our children. Local education is not here. We go towards the English education, and then we become foreigners. Some people are saying, yes, this is true. Yes. I want a social system. I want, as a society, to care about the concerns of my brothers and sisters in Kuwait, in Saudi, everywhere. But we are not capable of reaching this level, achieving this point that is valuable for all of us. This is very saddening. Every time I speak in politics, this is what I highlight. We do not teach our society Arabic, Sharia, history. These are the most important pillars of identity in any society. We destroyed them. We didn't give them priority at all. Some universities, for instance, the Department of Sharia and Arabic language is almost shut down. And the first security system is the culture of the society, self-immunity of the society. The society that is not capable of protecting itself at the cultural level, the strength of Turkey and Iran is about this immunity. Turkey and Iran, ladies and gentlemen, their immunity is because of this internal immunity. We do not have it in the Arab societies. Our societies are immuneless. Thank you. You destroyed us, Dr. Mar. The floor is yours.
So you want me to fix it now? So you don't want
Fix
us
it
to
now.
come back for this business. Regarding Dr. Zahed's question, I wouldn't go too much. Doctor summarized the problem. That's exactly what I was going to say. How to build a regional order. To build a sustainable regional order, we need first sustainable units that form the bigger order, and this brings the issue of the domestic resilience. I guess the translator used immunity, but Dr. Mahjoob meant the resilience, societal resilience and strong societies, strong domestic orders. And that's an endless discussion. I won't go into detail. And Dr. Fahad, I guess, asked a question about the grain deal and Turkey's role in the mediation. Sorry. I mean, that was a good example of how Turkey can play a role. Of course, initially Turkey, from the very beginning, even before the start of the conflict, tried to stop the conflict, tried to win the leaders. Even the President Erdogan wanted to invite the leaders to Istanbul to avoid the conflict. And still, this objective, for instance, again, he has been on the tour, and this is what he's telling, that he sees the prospects of Putin agreeing to a deal might be getting higher and higher. So one role Turkey can play is, of course, regarding the resolution of the conflict, ending the conflict. Personally, if you ask my opinion, I mean, without the conflict maturing, there is not much role for the third parties to stop it. So the conflicts usually end when the parties are ready to stop fighting. This is at least my approach to this question, and I don't see we are quite there, and therefore external mediation, be it from the Turkish initiative, from the Gulf initiatives, wouldn't do much at this point, because I see that both parties are willing to continue to fight. But the grain deal is, of course, a good example of low-key mediation initiatives. To some extent, this was framed by Turkey as a small step that can also help build the larger mediation role. So in that particular instance, Russia was also interested, because it wasn't just about letting the Ukrainian exports, but also Russia got certain concessions. So this also shows how maintaining such a channel with Turkey, letting Turkey play such roles, also serve Russia's own interests. In a sense, in that respect, there is mutual interest on Russia's part to see Turkey playing such a role. In that respect, also in other instances, the prisoner swap, so on and so forth, Russia did allow Turkey to play such a role. This is what we can realistically expect in the coming months in the conflict. Lower key initiatives, confidence building initiatives, Turkey could continue to deliver on that. Thank you.
قبل النهاية آخر كلمة.
Dr. Mahjoob wants to say something, although actually he destroyed us. So let him conclude. No, doctor, no. I do not want to just be highlighting the negative aspects. I want to talk with you because we love our society and we believe that we have a lot of potential, a lot of capabilities, a lot of capacity to improve, all of us, regardless of our geography. So instead of cursing the dark, I would like to invite you all outside. There's a big poster about the Gulf Study Journal. I am very proud to have kick-started this project, the first specialized published by Intellect, a specialized magazine twice a year. We want to create a new narrative about the region, about the rentier state, the oil state. So we want a new narrative, new rhetoric, the Gulf society, the youth, the women, economy. I invite you all. Actually, you can scan the code and visit the website of the magazine, and I invite you to contribute in creating this narrative. Our colleagues from Gulf universities are with us on the editorial board, so I invite you to get to know it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Mahjoob, and also thank you, Dr. Aras. Thank you for being with us. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.